BoJack Horseman ending? Oh, it's too much, man. After 6 seasons, the anthropomorphic Hollywood satire is coming to a close, and we have got to talk about how it all went down. I'm Kris Carr, and today I want to talk to you about the ending of BoJack Horseman. Before we dive in, I want to thank all of our donors on Patreon, especially our super nerd sponsor of the day, Charles Sheed. Thanks to you folks, we get to keep making videos for y'all. If you want to pitch in, head on over to Patreon and see if a donation tier works for you. You'll get stuff in return for your support. If stuff is all you're after, click that link to TeePublic and buy yourself an awesome shirt. They cover pretty much every fandom. And isn't life easier when people can just see on your shirt what you're into? On to BoJack! Obviously, guys, we're discussing the final episodes of the series, so if you haven't checked them out yet, you may want to hit pause on this video. I don't want to spoil anything for you, so only proceed if you're ready. First, a quick recap. When we last left BoJack, he had successfully completed a rehab program, made amends with many of the people he had wronged in the past, and was about to start teaching drama at Wesleyan, the same college his half-sister Hollyhock attends. He had set Todd up with fellow asexual Maud, Princess Carolyn was finally getting this whole work-life balance thing down, and Diane finally found a supportive boyfriend and went on antidepressants to help deal with her depression and anxiety. Over the past 6 seasons, BoJack has grappled with whether or not he's capable of being a good person. He's betrayed and let down his friends, he's turned to booze and pills instead of addressing his problems, and he's had a rocky history with women. So when season 6 set up the pins of BoJack finally confronting his sins without the crutch of substance abuse, we knew the final 8 were set to topple those pins down. 2 reporters were getting to the bottom of what happened with Penny and Sarah Lynn, and Hollyhock ran into Pete Repeat, who was going to spill the beans about prom night in New Mexico. At first, he seems to handle this well, all things considered. He eventually agrees with Diane that he has to face what he did and do so with honesty and integrity. He goes on television to address what happened, and ends up leaving the interview as a sort of weird icon for getting sober. But BoJack has never been known for quitting while he was ahead. A second interview proves to be much more probing, as Biscuits Braxby brings up multiple women BoJack has wronged, establishing a pattern of behavior and a perceived abuse of power against young women. This interview paints BoJack to be a villain, and Hollywood and society turn their backs on him. Which is fair. This is a low point all of BoJack's own making. He's sober, so we can't blame his addiction on this poor interview. His downfall here is his own hubris, and trips into the same pitfalls as season 1 or 2 BoJack. He fails to read the temperature of the room, and lets his deep-seated desire to be the star of the show take the reins. This shift in the court of public opinion, coupled with him addressing his own torrid history, proves to be too much for BoJack to handle. AA groups don't want to have him at their meetings, and he finds himself saddled with Vince Wagner as his sobriety sponsor. Vince was this sort of Alec Baldwin, Mel Gibson hybrid, a big star who was known for drunken disorderly conduct, racist and anti-Semitic rants, and sexual harassment. So, not an ideal, stable guy to take you on your recovery journey. Hanging with Vince leads BoJack to a frat party. While there, he tries calling Hollyhock. Hollyhock has known about BoJack's prom incident since the end of part 1, and she's been avoiding him, trying to figure out her relationship with someone who did something that makes her feel so incredibly uncomfortable. When all this news breaks, Hollyhock writes to BoJack. It isn't until this party that BoJack finally reads her letter. We don't know the specifics of what was written, but we do know it was devastating enough to send BoJack back into that frat party and start drinking again. I think it's fair to assume she decided to cut ties permanently with her estranged half-brother. BoJack's drinking continues quietly at first, with him drinking vodka from a water bottle on the set of his movie with Vince, The Horny Unicorn, and escalates to dangerous levels when he agrees to go see Angela Diaz. Angela Diaz was, of course, the network exec who fired Herb and convinced BoJack to not stand with him. While they drink together, Angela reveals that she was completely bluffing about Herb and BoJack's fate. BoJack thought this whole time that he was powerless in this situation, and it's dictated so much of his life, so this revelation is just shattering. The season, and I think the show as a whole, deals a lot with the idea of being powerless. As BoJack mentions, addicts are typically first asked to come to terms with their powerlessness, how they have to take things one day at a time. However, this idea is often misinterpreted. Admitting that you're powerless can mean to some people, like BoJack, that they're purely victims. It's not their fault they can't stop drinking, and they have to surrender to a higher power, which leads some to think that they don't really have free will. But the intention in saying you're powerless over alcohol or drugs is that if you struggle with them, you shouldn't be around them. They'll always win if you give them the opportunity to. At the end of the day, he's not completely a victim. He has a weakness, and it's his own responsibility to know that weakness as a fact, and that means not putting himself into positions where his willpower will break. All that being said, it's difficult to have a hard stance on personal responsibility. These characters, most notably Sarah Lynn and BoJack, were pushed to their limits. But how they handle themselves after that push is ultimately what ends up defining them. Their desperate desire for public approval and adoration to fill in their emotional holes cost them so much. The final 2 episodes focus on the sense of powerlessness and backlash coming to a head. The View from Halfway Down gives us this trippy, experimental narrative episode we've come to know and love from each season of BoJack, although the unique animation episode definitely goes to good damage. What BoJack thinks is just another one of his recurring dreams turns out to be him dying from his latest bender. It's an existential exploration of what life means. In the dream, the notable dead people in BoJack's life are gathered in Beatrice's home. When BoJack arrives, a cardinal is trapped in the house. I have 2 potential interpretations of this cardinal. Symbolically, red birds can represent, at the risk of sounding cheesy, the fire of your inner soul. Because this whole episode takes place within BoJack's mind, it's very possible that it is a representation of his subconscious keeping the neurons in his brain firing, his body keeping him active as long as it can. But also, cardinals can typically represent a loved one who's passed. When you see one, that means that person is visiting you. They'll show up when needed most or missed most, and can appear in times of trouble to let you know they'll always be with you. Here, the cardinal is trying to avoid being captured before BoJack shoos it out the window, perhaps showing how BoJack isn't ready to join his loved ones, or to further illustrate the complicated relationships he has with each and every one of these people. The meals themselves relate to the characters as well, and possibly are the last meals each character had before their deaths. Corduroy eats a lemon, which you'll recall he was biting into while trying to achieve the ultimate climax. Herb eats peanuts, which he was highly allergic to in life and died after crashing into a peanut truck. Crackerjack eats a can of army rations. Beatrice eats hospital food, like from her assisted living facility. And BoJack has a balanced meal of pills and alcohol. As they dine together in this Last Supper, the table plays a round of worst part, best part. A game where the deceased decide what was the best part of their lives and the worst part. Through the game and the consequent show following the meal, we learn that Uncle Crackerjack, the hero BoJack never met nor could live up to, wasn't the hero his mother painted him out to be. That Sarah Lynn full-heartedly believed that she wasn't selfish. She gave all of herself to her fans and left nothing for herself. As I briefly touched on earlier, Sarah sees herself as a sort of martyr and victim, which you can't deny. She was manipulated and abused. But as we've brought up a lot in these BoJack videos, that may explain your shitty behavior, but it does not excuse it. Sarah Lynn, or BoJack's mental depiction of Sarah Lynn, feels that giving her life to fans made her life worthwhile, that her suffering was for a greater purpose. The others argue what the point even was. Was the point of life to be good? To do good? Or does any of it even matter? Corduroy argues that if something gave you pleasure in life, then it came from a place of selfishness, not out of the desire to simply do good. Herb vehemently disagrees and thinks that the good feelings that came from all of his charity work do not diminish the value of his philanthropy. For BoJack's father, who manifests here as his hero secretariat, the best part of life was dying, until he realized that might not be what he wanted. His poem, The View from Halfway Down, is a heartbreaking piece filled with regret and fear from the perspective of a man in a free fall as he jumps to his suicide. This episode hammers home that for BoJack, death is it. There's nothing in the great beyond, no reward for how you lived. You just had a life, and you should have done something with it. And at this point, BoJack's life ends where the opening credits promised us, him drowning in that pool. It's long been speculated that BoJack would die drowning, with his dream memoir ending of walking out into the water and sinking, his fixation on the painting of treading water, and drowning being a universal metaphor for depression. But seeing that silhouette of him in the pool face down is still so startling. In the end, BoJack pulls through and faces more consequences. I mean, the guy got so blitzed he broke into his old mansion, bashed in doors and windows, stole booze and pills, then traumatized the kids by almost dying in their pool. The kid is fine, he's right by Gersh now. The finale is almost like an epilogue. Where are they now episode. BoJack is given a 14-month sentence in a maximum security facility where he still is trying to teach drama. They're putting on Hedda Gabler, which is widely regarded as being one of the greatest dramatic female roles in theater. This play also happens to feature romanticized suicide that doesn't play out, power dynamics between men and women, and an alcoholic who has squandered his talent. Pretty fitting choice. BoJack is given a pass to leave prison to attend Princess Carolyn's wedding to Judah. The logistics of this are mind-boggling, but hey, it's LA, anything goes. We're a lawless West still. We have a beautiful and intimate scene between BoJack and PC discussing giving in to happiness, and how people, especially the long-suffering Princess Carolyn, deserve it. I still miss Ralph. I'm sorry, but I do. I don't care how glorious Judah's hair is when he lets that man bun down. I really liked the mouse. I understand that Princess Carolyn has always tried to lift up those around her, often enabling their codependent behaviors at the expense of her own well-being. So it's nice to see someone who's lifting her up, supporting her, and anticipating her needs. But for me, their relationship is one of workplace dedication. not necessarily romantic love. I do think Judah genuinely loves PC, but it feels a bit one-sided. Then we end as our first episode of the series ended, with BoJack and Diane avoiding a party, talking to one another. Like her or loathe her, Diane is the closest thing we get to a sort of moral center in BoJack, and we've seen her grapple with the idea of helping versus hurting through enabling a lot, especially in this final season. So BoJack's call before he almost died, and consequently her thinking he was dead for 7 hours, really messed her up. She needed even more space from him. Being your friend's anchor doesn't feel like an honor. It feels like you're being weighed down. It's a lot of responsibility to be a person's reason for sobriety and staying on the straight and narrow. That's a lot to put on a person, especially someone who has their own issues they're trying to work through. This final conversation with Diane lets us know that she's not okay with a lot of what BoJack does to himself and to her. She doesn't forgive him for everything, but she doesn't completely reject him. And that's what I feel the writers wanted us to take away from BoJack. We aren't here to learn about handling problematic men. We aren't here to make a definitive judgment on what to do with famous people who fall from grace or dictate what they deserve. People are the sum of their parts. The good, the bad, the ugly. The people we respect and admire or fawn over due to their fame can let us down, and they probably will. But we can choose how we view them as a whole. As their conversation wraps up, BoJack brings up that tired old phrase, life's a bitch and then you die. Diane counters by saying, life's a bitch, but sometimes you keep living. Sometimes you do keep living, and that's all life can really ask of you. There's going to be a lot of discussion about whether or not BoJack should have died. Some are already saying that BoJack's survival is the story copping out, a happy ending tacked onto what should be a tragic cautionary tale. But I think this line points to the intentionality of his survival. Sometimes everything is the worst, and you don't die. You hit rock bottom, and you're blessed or lucky and have to keep moving forward. We don't have to resign ourselves to becoming tragedies. We can reframe our perspective and focus on moving forward, whether that's through self-improvement or self-acceptance. That's up to us. The episode ends with a Catherine Feeney song called Mr. Blue, as the two sit in a pregnant silence. While this silent ending is pretty ambiguous, the scene leading up to it suggests that, as BoJack says, this could be the last time they ever speak to one another. Diane has finally realized that BoJack is incredibly toxic for her, and her life is in a new place. For the first time since knowing BoJack, she didn't allow his mishaps and misfortunes to derail her. Yes, she stayed in Chicago before immediately moving to Houston with Guy, but then she realized that BoJack's relapse wasn't her fault, and she could and should try to be happy with someone who makes her feel good. And BoJack will have to figure out how to continue to not rely on her. He did a pretty solid job his last year at Wesleyan and found his footing, but like he talks to Todd about, he'll just have to keep moving forward, trying to beat his sobriety record each and every day. Being sober is easier when you're in an incredibly structured environment, like rehab or prison. So at this point, it's up to BoJack to try and stay the course. And he seems to already be coming to a crossroads that'll test his sobriety. He's enjoying helping inmates and putting on his production of Hedda Gabler, but there's also buzz about his upcoming movie The Horny Unicorn being his big comeback. Will the lure of fame and acceptance on a more global level once again tempt BoJack? We won't know the answers to these questions. The show BoJack Horseman was always uncanny with its timing. It was talking about the Me Too movement as it was breaking. And the show seems to land on the fact that we simply need to hold people accountable for their actions. The show has never wanted you to absolve BoJack of his past discretions. It's been upfront with telling you that he's not a great guy, and he's got a lot of growing to do. And even when he is in a place that he can finally be proud of his life, he still should suffer the consequences of the questionable things he's done. But even still, you can root for him to keep moving forward and keep trying to have that life that he can be proud of. There can be justice and forgiveness. There's still some cynicism in this ending. BoJack questions how it could even be possible for him to have a second act, a shot at redemption, and Princess Carolyn just responds by saying, "People have short memories. It's the best and worst thing about people." We'll never be sure of what legacy BoJack Horseman the character ends up leaving, but BoJack Horseman the series definitely stuck the landing and is, to me, one of the most important television series, animated or otherwise. And it's given us insight into a conversation that seems to be just getting started. Of course, this is all just my takeaway from the finale. How did you guys feel? Did I leave anything huge out? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks to everyone on Patreon, TeePublic, and all of you folks who just came for horsing around. For more videos, click to the left. Thanks for watching. See you, Space Cowboy.